yours. Freedom is mine. Freedom of speech, so I can write down these lines. If you and I agree, hold out your hand to me. We will share our freedoms with our friends and family. This is the Community Solutions Podcast. Jason Bradley, Andrew Richter from deep in the bowels of our underground lair. It's season 9, and it's just in time to usher in a brand new, fabulous era of American history. Andrew, how's it going?
Good. Wow, we've been doing this a long time. In fact, I did my first television show February of 2009. So a long time.
Yeah.
Been talking this stuff, and I don't know if the world's better or worse than it was then, but I'm more hopeful than I was a few months ago.
I think back then, like, we were really ignorant. We were starting to wake up, I think. You know, I voted for Bush both times, George W. Bush.
So did
but
I.
by the end of his second term, I was like, what the stink is up with this guy? And it's where the bloom started to come off the rose a little bit. And I did a lot of exploring and a lot of investigating, and I found more out about the world than I previously knew. I did not move to the left. Don't get me wrong, but I think I really matured in that period quite a bit.
Well, it's the realization of the uniparty. You know, I have shared on the air how I voted a million times, and excuse me, saw that coming. And I did vote for John McCain. I did vote for Mitt Romney. They were more anti-Obama votes than anything else. But, you know, at the time I was on Team Red. I don't know if I'd make those votes now. Maybe.
Yeah.
But I certainly, I didn't support either one of them in the caucus time.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I've shared that I voted for Bill Clinton when I was in college.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously the Democratic Party's totally different than it was then. So I don't know. I feel like I always look back and say I made the best decision at the time with the time I had. I think what's changed is our access to information, and I think that's the big. And we'll talk about that a lot today because, you know, freedom of the press, mainstream media, what constitutes a journalist, I think has been very much redefined. So I don't know. I know I did a lot of questioning. That was hard. It was hard. It was hard when I voted for Clinton. The reason Bill Clinton's probably the biggest reason I left the Democratic Party, but for different reasons than people think. It was because I got tired of defending the guy. The guy was slime, and even though I to this day don't think he was a terrible president, I don't. But would I trade Bill Clinton for Joe Biden any day of the week? But, you know, I just realized, and it took a while, for me to admit to myself that, geez, this guy's just on a different level when it comes. This guy couldn't tell the truth. If you sat on a hot grill, he wouldn't tell the truth.
Yeah.
And it just, I can't defend that anymore. And so I started questioning all of my views.
Yeah. Yeah. As did I back, in that period. Yeah. I was volunteering for the Republican Party at the time, in the local party here. And previous to then, I had gone down the rabbit hole of questioning everything, looked into all the different conspiracy theories that were out there. You know, I was listening to Alex Jones a lot at the time. I was listening to Glenn Beck, Glenn Beck stuck more, obviously, but even he has said that he's moved from where he was back then, and as he has found things out about his country. I was with the Republican Party, but I was supporting Ron Paul in 2008 and in 2012, and I ended up voting Constitution Party, as I think I've said before.
Daryl Castle,
Chuck
right?
Baldwin, and then Daryl Castle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got the years wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, I mean, you're talking about 08 and 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, see, and I like choices on the ballot. I think that keeps everybody, you got to earn every vote.
Right.
It doesn't take away from anybody. Yeah, I mean, it was, look,
Oh, go ahead.
would I do that again? I don't know. I mean, Mr. Paul brought up, I think, like Trump and maybe like Bernie Sanders on the other side, brought up a lot of issues that were being ignored by the party at large.
Yeah.
Role of government, size of government, promises that had been made, not kept. I think, concerns about foreign policy and right to privacy here in this country. I don't quite agree with Paul completely on those, but the debate wasn't even happening. I mean,
right.
It was, and I think the same with President Trump. I think when he brought up things like trade, like the border, things that Republican voters cared about, but the party elite didn't. Whoever the party elite is, I mean, I don't know how you define that anymore. I mean, everybody kind of has their own views as to who's. You want to destroy somebody's reputation, call them the establishment. Yeah. So, but I think it was healthy, and I'm glad Paul ran, and I'm glad, obviously, that Trump's there, because without them, a lot of these issues would have come to light.
I think where we're at now in the Republican Party is a big part as to what Ron Paul started.
Yeah, and the Tea Party movement, which was a rejection of the Bush-Cheney. It really was a rejection of their foreign policy and their kind of big government conservatism, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what you call George W. Bush now, who I don't think is a bad guy, but I think it's hard to argue his presidency was a success. You know. So yeah, and I think, there was also an opening created. I think under President Obama in particular, the Democrats became the party of the elites.
Yes.
Obama very much abandoned the working class and created that opening, but it took a Donald Trump to go get it. I mean, Nikki Haley doesn't get 48% of the Hispanic vote and 46% of the union vote. No way. So it's, it took the right person and the right messaging and there's an opening there.
Yeah.
They don't want to vote Democratic.
And the right team around him. I mean, you have like Turning Point USA, you had
especially
Scott
now.
Pressler, and
he didn't have some of that previously.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. There was
they did a lot of work. Now, granted, it was Trump's to win or lose, but you can
always lose it.
Yeah.
You can always lose.
Yeah.
You can always
Republicans have a long storied tradition of losing elections.
Well, I will put it this way right now. Republicans have, and again, I mean, they got, like I said before, they got 18 months, and the pressure's on Mike Johnson, and the pressure's on John Thune, and the pressure's not on Trump. It's on them to deliver. Trump will deliver what he can executively. We both know that.
Yeah.
But he can do 20% of his agenda that way, and that's about it. And this is the largest Republican majority since the 1920s. We have the House, the Senate. I say we, but the Republicans have the House, the Senate, the presidency, the Supreme Court, the majority of governors, and the majority of legislators. They haven't had that since Calvin Coolidge.
Right.
Okay, so it's not, they didn't have it under Reagan. They didn't have it under Newt Gingrich. They didn't have it under Eisenhower. They didn't have it at any time.
Yeah.
So this is the largest right now nationwide. The issues are on their side. So, and Trump's got a lot to do with that. The Dems have a lot to do with that.
Yes.
So it's an opportunity. If they miss it, when are they going to get it again if they miss it again? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
They have a chance to either cement themselves into power for the foreseeable future here, or to really just damage the Republican brand under, like, the MAGA Republican brand, and we just go back to this.
Well, and then the party will change again. Go back to what happened under George W. Bush. The Republican brand got tarnished.
Yeah.
They had majorities. They could have done anything they wanted to. They got cold feet. President Bush didn't have a second-term agenda. He ran on his past, not the future, which is the opposite of what Trump did. And so, and it took years for the Republicans to sort of find themselves again. And it wasn't until 2000, really now. I mean, I know Trump won once, but I mean, I think now he knows how he wants to govern, and I think that's a lot different than it was in 2016. Anyhow, Jay, I have no idea on the song. I think it's Andy Kaufman.
Andy Kaufman, Man in the Moon. Freedom of Speech by John Mellencamp. Who
I know him.
Who, ironically, probably... I don't know that he likes freedom of speech all that much when they disagree with his point of view. But it's... I
don't know. Some on the left still support it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny, here you have a guy that
is John Mellencamp and John Cougar Mellencamp the same person?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just like Vadi Divac and Yakov Smirnov?
Right.
Okay.
So, yeah, his first album, American Fool. He was John Cougar. Then came along, right? I think that was the next album. He was John Mellencamp, and then eventually he was John Cougar Mellencamp. So I don't understand. Anyways... Here you have the guy that has written some of the most iconic American songs that you can think of. Jack and Diane, Ain't That America, Little Pink Houses, right? You have all of these great Americana-type songs, and the guy loves his communists. I don't know. Explain that one to me.
Is he one of these guys that's still stuck viewing the Democrats the way they were 40 years ago?
He could be. He's an older guy.
I mean, I know a lot of people who they still think of, Truman or Kennedy. They haven't made the switch to like JFK'd be a Republican today. I mean, no question.
Yeah.
I mean, so they just haven't figured out that that's not really their views anymore.
Right.
There was a time Democrats believed in capitalism, believed in a border, believed in the Second Amendment, believed that a 6-year-old boy couldn't be a girl. That did exist at one time.
Yeah. Those were mainstream Democrat beliefs back in the 60s, 70s, 80s.
Even in the 90s. I mean,
Bill Clinton didn't stand for any of that.
Bill Clinton signed the Defense of Marriage Act. He signed an anti-cloning bill.
Yeah.
I mean, no Democrat would touch anything like that now.
Right.
So, I mean, well, whatever. I don't know if John Cougar Camp, what is Mellon Cougar? I don't know. I don't know if he's one of these people who just can't see a forest in the trees or what, or votes how his publicist says. I don't know. I always go back to something Kanye West said, that I can write a song about killing cops, but I can't come out publicly and say I support the president.
Right.
If you figure that out.
Yeah.
Jay, what's going on here in Minnesota? I mean, what's the deal with the legislature, which unfortunately for all of us begins very soon?
Yeah.
Next week or the week after? It's really coming up. Of course, Congress, unfortunately for all of us, is in session tomorrow.
Yeah.
What's the deal with these special elections? How can you have a special election in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
What's Governor Stinkball? What the hell's he doing?
I don't know. Maybe we should explain to everybody what's going on. There's 3 different scenarios here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And so
we got 3 different seats that are up in the air right now going into the session.
Yes.
that remain unfilled, technically.
Right. So the first one in Minneapolis, there was a death of a state senator. Now, the Minnesota Senate, Democrats have a 1-seat majority.
Right.
Let's see.
33 to 33. Well, 34 to 33. But right now it's 33-33 because of the recent passing of, I forget the name. I should know that. But it doesn't matter. But
Carrie Ziedzik?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So she passed away of cancer.
Sorry to hear that.
Unfortunately, but there's an open seat there. And so with that, obviously they want to have a special election. And it's Minneapolis, so there's not much more we have to say about that one.
True. But again, time is of the essence on their side. I mean, the lady's body's still warm, and Walz is out there calling for a special election.
Right. Which I guess
is the primary is January 14th, and the election is January 28th. You can't even get ballots printed. What happened to early voting? What happened to every vote counting?
Normally during a general election cycle, you have a 2-week window to register or file for candidacy, and then you have a period before the primary.
Yeah, I think it's 10 working days or something like. You're right, though. It amounts to 2 weeks, but it's 10 business days.
Yeah.
I think that. Yeah, I think that's state statute, though. I think they have to do that.
Yeah. But that's not what happened here for the special election. They had 1 day, December 31st, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Wasn't a lot of time to register for an election.
Yeah, what if you had to work that day?
Yeah.
just curious. It's a holiday for some people. Some people get that day off, but some people got to work.
Exactly. So I don't know what. I mean, if you have to make a decision like this, I think I'm going to run for that seat again, Minneapolis. Yeah.
Okay, but there could be 4 different Democrats who run. I mean,
and there are.
Yeah,
I believe there's a lot.
I think there's like 5. But, So basically, Governor Goofball orders a 1-day window. We have a primary coming up into. How do you run for this seat?
Well, I if you're a Republican, you really don't have to.
Well, okay, but I mean, if we're trying to be fair,
of anybody that wants to run, how do you run in that amount of time? You've got to do a mailer. I mean, that's really it. You got to come up with something immediately and get a mailer out there. You can't worry about a website. Maybe throw up a Facebook page, and you just get a mailer out so people know your name.
Yeah, and you have no time to raise money, so you're paying for it by yourself.
Right. Yeah. Unless you've ran before and you have a war chest.
I'd like to ask Tim Walz, Mr. Saving Democracy out there. You tell me what part of democracy this is. I mean, Walz is like Woodrow Wilson. He makes the world safe for democracy and destroys it everywhere that he has power.
Yeah.
Now, you got the same thing going on in Roseville. The Democrats should win this, but is disqualified for not meeting the residency requirement. He won.
Curtis Johnson.
Yeah, he won the election, but is now disqualified. And, of course, the House, which right now is Republican +2.
Yeah.
Because of the next race we'll talk about, the Brad Tabke race.
I thought it was funny because the judge, there was a judge that took a look at this and ruled that Curtis was ineligible to hold the office that he had won because he did not meet the residency requirements for the district. And then Curtis Johnson wrote a letter to Tim Walz that said he has made the difficult decision to not accept his seat in the Minnesota House of Representatives and to resign from the office of state representative effective immediately and irrevocably. You didn't resign or make a difficult decision. The judge told you did not meet the requirements and you're ineligible.
Yeah, you tried to rent an apartment or something like that.
Way to church it up there, buddy. Oh, my
You basically
word.
admit you don't live there, tried to rent an apartment, didn't do it, and the requirement is 6 months prior to something or other. I don't remember if it's primary or filing, or there's a state law that governs the legislature, obviously.
Right.
So
way to read the law before you.
But they must have a backup, because Walsey Walls didn't hesitate on this one either. And again, you're looking at, I think the whole reason is just to jam a Democrat in there as soon as possible so that they have that extra vote. But that Shakopee seat, I don't know what's going to happen there, because I don't trust the Republicans either, because if I were Lisa DeMuth, I would not allow him to be seated.
Right.
I would say no.
Yeah.
There's court stuff, kind of like Franken and Coleman.
Yeah, let it play out.
We're going to let this play out. And right now, with that seat gone too, the Republicans have the authority to do that.
Right. And I can't believe that there has been no talk at all, even with 20 missing ballots. 20 missing ballots in a race that is decided by less than 20 votes.
Yeah, 14, right?
Yeah, 14. That they're not going to have a revote in that case.
Well, I don't know what the prescription is legally, but if the court rules that Tabke can't take this seat, what happens then?
Yeah.
They're going to have to have another election. Walls is going to have to set a date again. I assume he has to have a primary.
Yeah.
And redo it. And the longer this drags out, the longer this is going to take to fill.
Yeah.
And what else can happen here? Let's just say, was this judge just going to sit on this? How long does it take to rule on this? This election was 2 months ago.
Well, the judge in the was it the Roseville case? Was it the Roseville or the Minneapolis case? Acted instantaneously. That didn't take very long.
Yeah, that happened quite quickly.
Yes, but this one they seem to be sitting on. So I don't know. It's. I guess looking at this, there was another issue, and you said that, and I didn't get to see the follow-up on this, but there were 30 other ballots in this race where they said that there was some
duplication. Scott County has dismissed that as, no, it was, they weren't counted twice or something. That didn't go before a judge, though. It was... something that Scott County just dismissed as Republican BS.
Well,
I don't know the details on that. I would guess it's another thing where litigation probably should come in, if that's even possibly true.
Yeah. There was a claim that 30 people voted twice in the race between Brad Tabke and the Republican Aaron Paul. So... the county election official says the allegations were erroneous, but I don't know that they provide.
I don't know. I don't know that I trust the Star Tribune to look into that with any vigorousness. My guess is the Democrat wins this. The Democrats win all of these close races.
It's funny how that works.
Can't think of any that the Republicans have ever won, especially in this state. If it's a very, very, very small margin, the Democrat wins every time.
Yeah, going all the way back to Al Franken. Really, there has not been anything that has broken in the Republicans' favor, and there continues to be ballots that are found. And please explain to me.
I go back to election integrity. I go back to the more things you have be it same-day registration, be it drop boxes, be it vouching, be it no voter ID, be it, lame residency requirements. The more of this, you're going to have more of this, not less. Every close election is going to get, and Minnesota never fixes it. I mean,
right.
Look at a state like Florida and how they fixed their problems after 2000. The hanging chads and that crap.
Yeah.
And Florida's probably the third biggest state in the country, and it's one of the best. Texas and California.
Maybe fourth.
Florida, I think, is past New York.
Has it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. 30-29 or something for the electoral votes. And they're one of the best run elections anywhere. I mean, anywhere in the nation. So this can be fixed. We can all be Arizona, or we can be Florida. Mm-hmm. And elections in this country are decentralized. We've talked about this before.
Right.
And I think there's real 9th and 10th Amendment questions to be raised about it.
Well, I think any Republican state, any red state that wants to have really good top shelf elections, they should make that option then to go talk to the Secretary of State in Florida and figure this out. Right.
Well, I think a lot of them have. Here's the problem, though. A lot of the red states where, Trump wins by 30, because the election is so one-sided, I don't know how much they, I think some of them are kind of lazy as far as getting into I think some of the close elections, especially in a state like Florida, have really caused them to re-examine everything they do. Right. I can't believe that hasn't happened in Nevada, in Arizona, in any of these other places, because they're just laughing stocks throughout the country.
Right.
That, the Masters starts next weekend and they're still counting ballots in Arizona. It's ridiculous. So, but again, I go back to the Constitution, and look, I'm the biggest states' rights guy there is. Well, probably not. I'm up there. But, is one election, is one county doing things one way, and Pennsylvania is a state, a commonwealth, and they delegate a lot to their counties. Georgia does it too. Remember in 2020, one county went home at night and one county stayed and counted ballots. There's a chain of custody question. Why is one staying and one? Who made that decision? And I know Georgia's a state that cleaned up. They're another state that cleaned up a lot.
Oh yeah.
After that, Governor Kemp and the legislature, really did make a lot of good, positive changes there.
Right.
But what has to happen? Does that have to happen to get a state? Does anybody think Joe Biden won Georgia in 2020? I mean, come on. Anybody think Al Franken was ever won that election in 2008?
No.
I mean, come on. So it's become a joke, and unfortunately, I think I wish that wasn't an issue. I wish both sides could just agree on election stuff and let the best candidate and the best issues win, but that's certainly not the system we have. Government's too big. There's too much money out there. Too many careers depend on it. Mm-hmm. And that just goes to show how big and out of control government's become.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it has. And I think there's some states that don't fix it because they're inept. And then there's some states that don't fix it because they know that it gives them an advantage. And it's also, and we're going to talk about this right now, it's also where a dishonest media is truly and honestly the biggest obstacle to this. Yeah.
Because the bull that is put out there about election integrity and photo ID and vouching, voter suppression, these garbage wastebasket terms that you hear perpetuated by the corporate media is also part of why this doesn't get fixed. It's
Right.
also why the public outrage, other than, largely just on the right, that's why it's only there.
Yes.
And then it becomes like everything else. It's a red versus blue thing rather than a right versus wrong thing. It completely disintegrates into that, and that makes it really hard. So, anyhow.
Yes.
Jay, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I believe in freedom of the press. I have my definition of what that means, and that may even differ from you. I don't know.
Okay.
President Trump, basically he's been the president since November 6th, is engaged in 3 legal actions right now against the corporate media.
Okay.
One has already been settled against George Stephanopolous for calling him a rapist 10 times on the air. The other is with Viacom, which is the parent company of CBS, about the editing of the Kamala interview. And then the third one is against, I guess, the Des Moines Register. I don't know if they're part of the corporate monster, but about the most accurate pollster on the face of the earth that was only off by 18 or 17 or 19 or whatever it was the weekend before the election. Now, I got to ask a question first.
Okay.
What is freedom of the press to you? What does that mean? Well, I know why the framers have it there, but what is freedom of the press?
Well, it means that they're free to print whatever the government tells them to. Of course. A little state-run media is exactly what the framers had in mind. Freedom of the press, to me, I guess, let's dissect the First Amendment, okay? You have freedom of speech, and that protects speech that's not popular, even untrue speech.
Yes.
Freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of association,
Freedom of assembly.
and freedom of assembly. Now, when you look at, you have freedom of the speech, which, like I said, even includes untrue speech, unpopular speech, and then you have freedom of the press. And does that at all differ then? It's funny because they're both named in there, and you would think with freedom of speech that you wouldn't have to name freedom of the press because they're all about speech, right?
Well, no, in the Federalist Papers, Hamilton
Yes.
and Madison addressed that.
Exactly.
That it's not propaganda, it's the government cannot abridge the press. The government cannot outlaw speech. The government cannot stop your free exercise thereof religion.
Right.
They do a good job of distinguishing. Of course, the press was a little different in 1787.
Right.
They couldn't have envisioned today. But
you had the yellow journalism and all that even back then.
Yeah, and if you go back to England, the king had their own propaganda wing.
Oh, yes.
All these dictators and things like that, they controlled the main street. They controlled information that got out to citizens. And I think that was the framers, I don't remember their exact words or anything, but that was their intent. Not only do citizens have the right to freedom of speech, but people who spread information have got the protection from government.
Yeah.
Remember, our rights come from our Creator. They're not given to us by a constitution. Government can only take rights away. They don't grant rights.
Right.
So I think I don't think it's an accident that this is the First Amendment. I don't think the things they put in there I don't think that was not lost on them. Without the First Amendment, you can't have any of the other amendments.
Right. It's true. How
can you have freedom of how can you have the right to bear arms if you don't have the first basic freedoms?
Right.
You know,
I mean, the first two really are kind of what everything else hinges on. The second protecting the first and the others. But at the same time, you have to be able to have that freedom of speech, and whether to carry a firearm or not is certainly a form of speech. This is, you're showing what you believe in. Yes. Hamilton discussed the liberty of the press in number 84, Federalist paper number 84.
Should be required reading for any high school graduate.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's long, because it's 85 different.
Sure, but there's Cleveland notes. If I have to read Shakespeare in high school, these people can read the Federalist paper.
Oh, absolutely, they should. It should be required reading. So Hamilton argued that bills of rights were unnecessary and dangerous because they would provide a pretext for claiming more power than was granted. He said it would be absurd to provide against the abuse of power that was not given. But Madison, also an author of Federalist Papers, he was the initial drafter of
the Bill of Rights.
The Bill of Rights, including freedom of the press as one of the great bulwarks of liberty. It shall be inviolable. And that one, the Senate had originally defeated until they rewrote the language.
Yeah, there was originally like 12 or 13 in the Bill of Rights, and it either got combined or whittled down to 10. Because remember, the Constitution passed and the Bill of Rights came a couple of years later under President Washington.
Yeah.
The Constitution was amended. I was like 1791, 1792. Anyway, we're getting into the weeds here. But Jay, my question for you is this.
Yeah.
What does freedom of the press mean? Does that mean the press can do anything they want to, say anything they want to, do anything they want to? And if the answer to that is no, then where's the limitation or accountability?
Right.
I mean, stop for a second.
Yeah.
Take the Stephanopolous case, and I'll just briefly explain that.
Okay.
Stephanopoulos 10 times on the air, which is factually incorrect.
Right.
It's totally incorrect. It's defamatory. And Trump sued ABC saying, this, which is not easy for a public figure. It's not easy for a public figure to win cases like this. ABC, after Stephanopoulos was ordered to be deposed and answer questions, and he fought it, tried to avoid it, tried to get out of it. They did every legal means to stall the case. ABC quickly settled, giving money to Trump's library or legal costs or whatever it is. So how do we look at that settlement? What do we see out of that? What's our take out of it?
Well, I mean,
okay, first off, does Stephanopoulos have the right as a member of the media to go on the air and call anybody he wants a rapist? Is that freedom of the press?
Well, I guess so. I mean, the National Enquirer and the World News Weekly made a whole deal out of publishing things that weren't true.
True. They've lost some kid. Clint Eastwood won a big case back in the 90s against them,
and that's it. I mean, it ran its course, though. I mean, there are libel laws and things like that, and yes, they're difficult to win
because they don't apply to everybody. But again, what a public figure is today is a lot harder to get a handle on. But again, is it? Here's what I don't understand. ABC claims through their, quote, spokespeople, which, of course, Disney is their parent company, I'm going to make the case that we don't have freedom of the press. We have 5, 6, 7 corporations that control every outlet of the mainstream media.
Yes.
Every radio station, every news organization, every newspaper. There's about 7 or 8 corporations that control them all.
Yes.
Disney, Viacom, Comcast, News Corp, Clear Channel, and so on.
Yes.
They're the big ones. There's a few others. I mean, the New York Times, their parent company owns the Boston Globe, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Atlanta Urinal Constipation. I mean, and I know newspapers are going the way of the black and white TV.
Right.
But they still have a large audience, even though it wasn't what it was, when, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So we don't really have freedom of the press. We have an oligarchy of corporations that control information. Now, that's getting broken up right now by alternative media.
Right.
But for a long time, I don't know that we've had freedom of the press. I don't know that journalists are free to go pursue any story that they want to.
Oh, no. I mean,
they got to go to their corporate bosses and blah, blah, blah. So, but this is my question to ABC. ABC claims that they told Stephanopolous not to say this multiple times. They have documentation that don't do this. You can't do this. This is too far. You're going to get us in trouble, blah, blah, blah. Stephanopolous does it anyway.
Right.
Why isn't Stephanopolous fired?
Or at least fined. Like have his pay docked or something.
He just got a new contract, $18 million a year. Why didn't they just fire him?
Because they really are kind of like, oh, don't you do that now. I mean it. You do
naughty,
this
naughty.
And we'll have to be very angry with you.
But I mean, if ABC really has documented proof that, see, this tells me that ABC's jerking the curtain here, that they don't have that. And if discovery happens, you're going to find they don't want the other, stuff out there that they went back and forth about. Mm-hmm. They don't. I mean, that's why they settle, because they don't want to go through litigation's the only way to get that. But I don't understand I don't understand. This is what I'm talking about. What I'm trying to get at is nobody in the media is ever held accountable. Just because you have the freedom to do something does not make you immune to consequences.
Exactly.
The Russian hoax. Okay, name anybody from the mainstream media that's been fired over that.
Yeah, nobody.
People went to jail. They lost their jobs. They got their reputation. Steve Bannon, General Flynn, Roger Stone. Yeah, this BS story ended up being complete garbage, and no one from the mainstream media lost their job. Nobody. Not a single person.
Hillary Clinton hasn't seen jail.
There were people on this issue night after night after night. So when we talk about freedom of the press, it's like, okay, but and look, my definition of freedom of the press is you can ask any question, you can pursue any story.
Yeah.
I mean, that's freedom.
Absolutely.
Freedom is not, well, my corporate bosses don't want me to talk about Joe Biden's declining mental health, so I'm just not going to tell anybody about it. I'm sorry, that's not freedom of the press. Look, if a tobacco company lied about what was in their cigarettes, they would be sued and they would lose. We've seen that.
Yes.
So why is the press treated with, 60 Minutes defense to Trump's lawsuit is, we edited it. We can do anything we want to. If we want to bring you on, Donald Trump, and we'll put a bird on your head, we can do it if we want to.
Right.
That's absurd. That's an absurd argument. I mean, I'm sorry, it is. It's lying over the public airwaves to the American people. That's what, it's not a license to do that. I don't think. Now, I know that people are going to tell me, well, that's a slippery slope you're going down because, but there has to be some accountability to the media, and I don't know how to get it. I don't know how to get the mainstream media to do their jobs and to not engage in this. I mean, sorry, what CBS did is election interference.
Yes. See, and that you could go after them for. Those are the types of things where there has to be some sort of accountability. There has to be a consequence, a penalty. And by using existing laws, I mean, you can't do it in Washington, D.C. or New York, but you find a way to go after them somehow somewhere else or whatever. You find a judicial circuit that is at least fair. Here's the problem. I think that when they lie, the market has to speak. The problem is you have all of these journalists that are coming out of Columbia or these
Harvard,
different
Northwestern.
All of these Ivy League places. They have the same professors, the same radical professors from the 60s that hate conservatism, that are
traditional America,
communists, socialists, Marxists, and so the people that they're turning out all have the same opinion. And in fact, it gets more and more radical because now the leftists at the New York Times forced out all of the Democrats at the New York Times, right? And so you have to be able to have legal repercussion to go after when there's election interference, when there's libel. And again, it doesn't make it easy, but you've got to at least speak up and keep pointing it out in the hopes that people are going to stop paying attention to these things. And that's where guys like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn and Charlie Kirk, who have these huge podcasts, I think are starting to, a lot more people watch and listen to them than what watch and listen to CNN or MSNBC. I mean, you still have a lot of people that are getting lied to that actually believe this stuff because they're low information people. They don't go search out firsthand accounts to try and figure out if something's true or not. Instead, they just take somebody's word for it.
Isn't it sad though that's what the world's come to? That these alleged journalists, who study journalism, and I'm assuming. I mean, you Edward Morrow, Upton Sinclair, Yellow Press, William Hearst Randolph. I mean, and the consequences of some of that, I can't understand how they haven't studied that and realized that there are consequences to what they do. Mm-hmm. And their personal opinions are one thing. I have personal opinions too, but I can tell the truth.
Yeah.
If Republicans do something I don't like, I get on the mic and I say so. I don't.
Right.
I don't just stand here and cheerlead.
But here's the problem. You have journalists. Journalism is a lot less about news than it used to be. It's more about opinions, and everybody wants to say their opinions. And there are people that are honest about that, and then people that present it as news. And anytime you have journalists that are working hand in hand with either the parties or the government itself, that's where you run into a lot of trouble. You have journalists, I say that in quotes, that work with, say, an administration either in St. Paul or Washington, D.C. on their staff. And then when they're done, they go and work for these outfits as well.
MSNBC. What's Biden's old spokeswoman with the red hair?
Yeah.
Has Jen Penske. She has her own show on MSNBC.
Yeah, Psaki.
Psaki, whatever.
Circle back.
Yeah. Got her own show. Penske. Got her own show. She's a propagandist for the... I mean, look, every president has a spokesperson, but they didn't hire Sean Spicer.
No.
Didn't hire Ari Fleischer.
Nope.
Ari Fleischer works on Fox, but as a commentator.
Right.
Not as a journalist. which is very different.
Very different. Yep.
So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with debate on a show. I like debate.
Right.
I think debate's important. I don't necessarily like, 1 minute. Here's another thing I hate about the media. There's never any aspiration to get to the truth. Okay,
Yep.
Democrat says this, Republican says this. Whoa, okay. What's the truth of it? And there's just no effort to do that. Now,
Right.
here's the thing. What I want is better journalists. I don't want to sue everybody that I don't like. But is it journalism for CBS to do an interview with Harris, edit it clearly to make her look better, refuse to put the whole interview on YouTube or on, I assume they have Windows 95.
Yeah.
They could easily do that. They could have released the
Absolutely.
transcript, which is probably laying in a file cabinet somewhere, and they refuse to do it. Now, how in the world can they masquerade that as journalism?
Well, that's. I don't know.
But is that, like I said, if they did an interview with Trump and put a bird on his head, can they claim, well, we're freedom of the press, we can do anything?
It's entertainment. I mean, that's really what it is. You're
Probably
taking
get great
a piece of
ratings. You
content-
get great ratings with
Yeah.
Trump on there.
Right. But
Put
I mean,
a bird on his head, it'd be iconic forever. His hair is perfect for it. You saw an egg fall out, you'd believe it.
Yeah, but you have these journalists that refuse to cover the whole thing, and it would be easy as someone who, on behalf of my church, I take the sermon and I put it out onto YouTube every week. Now, I do edit it down to just the sermon, but I don't cut things out of the sermon.
But
Okay.
to me, I equate it as you and I cut a podcast
Yep.
for an hour and a half.
I
and
don't edit it.
We put our best 20 minutes out there.
Right.
And the other, well, it's all the best. But I mean, that's, I would never do that. I mean, like,
Right.
that's not right.
But we know that happens because when Kamala went to Fox to do her interview with Bret Baier, that's what they wanted her to do.
Yeah.
And this is how long it is. And then she showed up late, so it was only 20 minutes.
Well,
And so it's when you have the government trying to control the output of the press, that's where there's a real problem. You have a collusion between these experts, again in quotes, and the government saying, okay, here are the facts, and we're going to fact check everything, and
well, but what was the debate where the candidate got all the questions before the?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, how could anybody claim freedom of the press there? I mean, I'm just going to say, if you're going to cheerlead for one side, if you're going to edit to make one side look better, you're sacrificing your freedom of the press as far as I'm concerned. Now, look, does that mean I want everybody suing each other? What I want is accountability. The biggest scandal and the biggest media scandal, certainly of my lifetime, is covering up Joe Biden's declining mental health, which Americans saw through.
Absolutely.
MSNBC wasn't fooling very many people unless they were just mind-numb Democratic robots.
Well, we saw it before he got elected.
We saw it in 2000. He spoke to a dead congressman.
Yes.
We saw it in 2019. Go back to those debates where he spoke for 5 minutes and it was just rambling, psychobabble, incoherent. I mean, they aided and abetted his ability to, campaign in the basement.
Yeah.
And then when it gets all blown up after one debate, they turn on him and act like they hadn't been part of the cover-up.
Right.
Joe Scarborough get fired? No. Rachel Maddow get fired?
Nope.
No. Joy Reid get fired? No. Nothing whatsoever. And for Dean Phillips, Van Jones,
Yep.
Jim Carville were getting lambasted by other members of the media and other members of the Democrats.
Yeah.
Robert Herr.
And then,
And where do they go to get their reputation back? Mm-hmm. Nowhere.
right.
So, I mean, again, I come back to what is the definition of freedom of the press, and what does that mean?
It's supposed to be the freedom to pursue the tough stories, to hold government accountable, or to hold public figures that are, powerful accountable without the reprisal or the
Interference, if you will.
or punishment for what they write. I mean, that really is, in essence, what it is supposed to be.
Okay, then let me back up a sec.
Yeah.
Who holds the press accountable then?
Well,
I mean, you could say we the people, but
we're supposed to.
I can't fight Viacom. I can't
But
fight
you cannot
Disney.
watch it. You cannot read it.
And I don't. I do it sometimes just to see what they're saying, just because
Yeah.
I make that sacrifice for our audience and for, I watch The View for 5 minutes. It's about all I can stand. I've watched Snuffleupagus a handful of times to see what he's saying. I even turned on MSNBC one time. CNN is a little bit better. Some of the Democrats on there are a little bit, but when I'm complimenting David Axelrod, it's thin ice over there. But Axelrod gives an honest opinion, and I respect that. But I just go back to, yes, you can hold, I can, but ultimately, I feel like they're an industry that is kind of like government in a way. They are immune from accountability. They think they are.
Yes.
They think they can do anything with no consequences. And to me, this ABC settlement just encourages more of it to happen. George Stephanopoulos either disobeyed what his bosses said and put his company out for a liability. He defamed someone that he hates and then gets rewarded for it with an $18 million a year contract.
Right.
Now, you tell me, where's the accountability there? There's zero.
Yeah.
It encourages it to continue. Stephanopoulos gets fired, maybe 5%, 10%. Obviously, it's not going to be most. Go, okay, he went too far.
Yeah.
We'll report our stuff that we don't like Trump. We can't go that far. We can't do that. That's not acceptable. Maybe 5%, 10% do that.
Yes.
Maybe a light bulb goes on in another company's head. Hey, maybe we should practice some journalism here and not worry about the ratings of the quarter hour.
Right.
Okay.
Instead,
how many clicks we get
right
on the internet.
The only thing they care about are ratings. Who gets fired? People with low ratings.
Sure.
Jeffrey Toobin, but then he gets hired back.
Yeah. Don Lemon, same thing.
Yeah.
But here's the other part too. Is has it become, especially on cable news, even on the right too, it seems like who gets their own show, who gets in at the round table, is not the person with the smartest opinion, not the person who works the hardest.
No.
It's the person who's the most fun to watch. It's the person who yells the most. It's the person who... Watch ESPN, that's all it is. It's Stephen A. Smith journalism. It's whoever has either the dumbest opinion or the loudest opinion or is the funniest to listen to.
Yeah.
They're the people who are on now.
Well, I must say in his defense, Mark Levin might be loud, but he's actually good.
Yeah,
but
I can tolerate him for a while.
Yes.
Not too long.
Right.
But, he has good segments. I like the segments more than the monologue, but that's me.
Yeah.
Normally I like monologues. Something about Levin puts me off. I don't know what it is. Not what he says so much, but maybe it's that bald head, or I don't know what it is, but. Something about Levin kind of puts me off. But, I mean, And I know we've talked about how, look, the biggest loser in this year is corporate media, but corporate media is still backed by gazillions of dollars. They're still not going. I'll tell you what I'd do if I were Trump. What I would do if I were Trump, I'd take ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, ban them from the White House press corps.
Yeah.
Get out of here. You're I don't have to bring you in here.
Well, he's thought about it.
Well, he has. I think Trump likes the give and take. I think Trump likes to get in front of any audience he can get in front of.
Yes.
I think he sees value in that, and I think it is paid off a little bit because you've seen crossover vote to him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure MSNBC is where they're getting it, but I think Trump wants to be the president of everybody, not just the president of, people who listen to so-and-so's podcast. I mean, I'd make them earn it. You don't just get one because you're CBS. I mean,
right.
I do something. He has the bully pulpit. Again, not telling them what to say. But it's like, look, if you're going to defame me and not cut me, why should ABC, that basically settled with him, basically admitting they're wrong,
right? Why
should they be allowed to come back in the press corps?
Well, I mean, and that's an option to say, like, listen, you guys know when you're telling the truth or not. If you're going to criticize me, that's one thing. But if you're going to outright lie and defame me, you don't need to be here. That is an option. I don't know if it's the best option because then it's going to look like you're tamping down on freedom of the press. But maybe if you move them to the back of the room, there's talk about that. Move you guys to the back of the room, and in the front, I'm going to fill up people from the Blaze, people from Daily Wire, people from Bring
the Babylon Bee in there. I think that'd be hilarious. The questions they'd ask.
Oh, absolutely.
But I mean, why should the people who didn't report that the president of the United States is a Herman Munster? Why should they be allowed back in?
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's an accountability. Now, look, they're going to call Trump a whiner and blah blah blah, and Trump doesn't care. And like I said, I think he likes doing some of the sparring, but he's got to put friendlier media in there.
Yeah,
I mean, he has to have a balance. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying, all right, if you people are in here, I'm going to bring in some other people. Or maybe Trump needs to do 2 press conferences, one to the friendlier media and one to the mainstream, because one of the challenges that I think he faces is the corporate media still, despite the Glenn Becks and the Joe Rogans and people like that, they are still backed by mega corporations. They still own public airways. They own all of these channels, and
George Soros just bought a bunch of radio stations.
Right. I mean, they understand, and he's got to continue to grow that alternative media.
Yeah,
and I think that's something that I think it's part of why he won. How many podcasts? He went on like 3 a day.
Yeah.
Podcasts I had never heard of.
Oh, I know.
And they had a decent audience. And they weren't always super favorable either. Some of them were more than others. I mean, they all treated him with respect fairly, but they didn't ask all softball questions or anything like that.
Right.
And it was it's so interesting to see somebody sit down for an hour, and talk. Trump could go all day talking, and just wandering off into wherever. But I mean, they were cool to listen to, and I think he needs to do that throughout his presidency.
Right.
I think it's important to keep up with that and grow that alternative to what we have in the mainstream media. And I think, so I don't know. I think the Des Moines Register case, I think is going to be a tough one. I think it's tough to say that a poll, although I think Trump's right. I think that is what happened.
Right.
That they put out a poll that was BS. knowing it would get coverage, knowing it would skew resources, knowing it would affect other states. It actually probably didn't.
Right, and that's where that case, I think, really gets tough for him to win.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't, I think, everybody kind of wrote that one off. And here's the trouble with that, though. If you punish somebody for putting out a bad poll, it gets us to kind of where we are now, where nobody publishes the outlier polls, and all we see is this narrow, within 1 to 2 points. Well, that doesn't tell us anything.
I think that what is the hard part about it, look, if we're going to punish bad pollsters, Quinnipiac would have been sued out of existence 30 years ago. I think the hard case to make is intent to damage someone's, if they can make, the hard part is proving intent to inform the public or affect the outcome. How do you distinguish between the two? If you and I conducted a poll, Jay, and we informed the public of our responses,
yeah.
How do you know what our intent is to do? Is our intent to just publish what we have, or is our intent to influence? Either way, polls do influence people.
Yeah.
They certainly influence campaigns, or they wouldn't pay for them.
Right.
So I don't know that poll was done on the cheap. I don't know if that poll was done the way polls used to do, and they're not reaching certain people. I don't know how Emerson nailed Iowa within half a point, and this poll was 17 points off. I don't understand. They should call up Emerson College and ask how that happened. But I think he's going to have a really tough time with that lawsuit. I'm not really clear on who the victim is there. I think Trump might just be doing it to, get them to think twice and be more accurate. But we have a polling business now that is just three sheets to the wind. And I do think there are a lot of BS polls out there. I do think there are biased ones. I did an entire YouTube video on the New York Times and how they had to know that their poll was wrong. Mm-hmm. Because they didn't adequately in Arizona. It was Arizona. And they have a certain percentage of people who are Republican, certain percentage that are independent, certain percentage of Democratic, and that wasn't reflected in their poll.
Right.
So again, it's a BS poll. They have the right to do it. But again, they're lying to their consumers. Now, I don't know that the Des Moines Register did that. I don't know that that's what really happened there. So I think that's one that's questionable. But 60 Minutes, they're 100% guilty of what they did. They basically admitted that they did it.
Yeah.
They just said, nah, First Amendment. I don't know. It's a real tough one.
The thing that makes that one tough as well is, at what point do you say you can't edit an interview? Can you edit it for time? Can you edit it for content? Can you edit it because somebody said something that breaks the censorship laws?
Well, I think you have no choice then, though. I mean, I don't think you have any. You could get.
Yeah,
FCC can come after you. Yeah, I mean, I think that wouldn't stand up in court.
Right.
Like if somebody said the F word, I think you have no choice but to edit that out.
Right.
Or beep it. Maybe beeping it would be the best thing to do. Yeah.
But, if you're supposed to have a 15-minute interview that ends up going 25, do you cut 10 minutes out of that, or do you have to make adjustments? I mean, these are the kinds of calls that, if you get sued and, for editing an interview, where are the limits on that?
Well, I'll tell you what. This is a lesson I learned when I left the Crystal Planning Commission because I realized I'll never do an interview that's edited. I'll never agree to one.
Right.
I'll never agree to one ever again. I don't talk a whole lot outside of our podcast. I mean, I don't do this to hear myself talk. I don't have a need to do that. I mean, I've gone on other shows very rarely because once we do a podcast, Jay, what I want to have said, I've already have said.
Right.
I don't feel the need to say it again. Okay. But, in 2014, when when John Budashevsky and I had our tussle, and I ended up, I learned very quickly that an edited interview is something I'm never going to do again.
Yeah.
And I don't blame anybody for it. I'm the one who called up, Joe Bowen used to work at the Sun Post. He and I knew each other. Called him up, told him what happened. He was going to find out. I wanted him to hear it from me. And we talked. He told me, I'm going to call Mark Hoffman and talk to him. I said, go ahead. You should. That's what you should do. But in the course of the article coming out about, I was quoted accurately, and there's no animosity at all between me and Joe Bowen. About 10% of what I had to say made the article.
Right.
Now there was a whole backstory, and maybe he didn't have enough. It would have taken 8 pages to write this, but this is why we did a podcast, why I wrote all this on our blog, because I wanted people to know what the whole backstory was.
Right.
About Budashevsky mocking other council people, mocking people that showed up to speak, talking under his breath, rolling his eyes, that crap, which wasn't seen if you watched the video.
Right.
And that's where he acted like a son of a bitch, and that's what I called him out on. Okay, I wasn't the nicest about it. But I stand by what I said. But this is the thing about an edited interview.
Right.
If you just picked up the paper, I'm not sure you'd get all of that as, you wouldn't get the whole backstory to it. So, I mean, that's the danger, I think, in doing that stuff is that if you're running for president, I mean, this is, again, CBS, come on. You have a presidential candidate. What do you have to report on 60 Minutes that's more important than that? Well, we only had 15. Oh, bull. Bull.
Yeah.
What do you have to put out there that's more important? You're not doing any real journalism anyway, so what does it matter? They use that as an excuse to cut it down to, where Harris was sitting there trying to remember her rehearsed lines and cutting that out and all that. And they did it to Trump when Leslie Stahl did it to Trump to make him look bad in 2020. I mean, it's clear journalism malpractice.
True. Now, if the people that get wronged by media would stop going to them for interviews, would stop buying their crappy media, would stop watching it, listening to it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it'd be kind of like, did you hear what so-and-so wrote? Nope. Yeah. And it's a big collective nope from the country.
Well,
eventually they either got to shape up or they go out of business.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I just feel like, I don't know, it's just too bad it has to be that way.
Right. It is, but I mean, that's the truth of where we're at. I mean, what happened to
Mike Wallace and David Brinkley and just where did that
Tim
go?
Russert.
Yeah, Tim Russert was good. Where did that go?
Everybody wants their opinions to be heard. They don't care about getting down to the right answer. They care about about shaping public opinion. They it's not enough to go to all of the powerful and rich people parties and to be, part of the in club. They also can't stand to be criticized by the people, so they have to make certain people look good. They have to write fluff, and they got to be the cool kids with the populace and with the rich and powerful.
They suck. They just suck. It's just too damn bad. I'll tell you what, though. The one thing that really has me concerned is half the country going to one place for media, half the country going to another. I mean, that is concerning.
Yeah.
To me. That it's like two different worlds. And of course, half the country doesn't watch MSNBC. What am I saying? Yeah. But I mean, that's why I just think it's so important to have debate. Yeah. And it's so important to bring people on your shows that maybe don't always agree with you on everything. I think it's so important to do that.
Yeah.
And I know that can get hard and combative, and I actually enjoy it. I actually enjoy talking to people that I don't always see eye to eye on.
Yeah.
If everybody had the same opinion, then nobody's working. Nobody's learning anything.
Nobody's challenging anyone to get better.
Exactly. And so I think it's, I don't know.
Yeah. So what do you think the solution is? I mean, we've got all of this big media that really it's garbage for the most part. It's entertainment. And do you think that a greater stake in citizen journalism is the answer?
Yeah, I think it is part of the answer. My question is, why aren't these media sites being broken up by like the FCC?
Yeah.
Why are 6 companies allowed to control the airwaves? Why is it like that?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, go to cable. Comcast, who owns NBC, they own the History Channel. They own USA. They own A&E. They own, News Corp, which owns Fox, which owns Fox News, which owns FX. I mean, why are they allowed to? Why are these mega corporations? It's kind of like, there's 4 health insurance companies, and there's, why is it that the public airwaves don't have the freedom of choice that they should? And look, I'm not attacking business. That's not what I'm trying to do here. But is it good that 5 or 6 corporate masters control all of these channels, all of this content? I think breaking that up. Now, look, alternative media is part of it. But I think the FCC doing their job is another one.
Yeah.
You break up this monopoly. And you allow other people in.
Right.
Why can't another network be on, just like MSNBC, just like News Nation is one that's broken in a little bit.
Yeah.
I think they're still owned by News Corp, though.
Oh.
Maybe they're not. No, they're not, because Bill O'Reilly works. Oh, he doesn't work for them, though.
No, he's like a commentator.
He goes on Chris Cuomo's show all the time.
Yeah.
But maybe they're not owned by News. I don't know who owns News Nation, but they're one that's kind of breaking in a little bit. But it's concerning that
It's owned by Nexstar Media Group.
Okay.
It is one of the largest broadcasters in the U.S. still.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe they are part of it. It feels different on that channel, though. I feel like they are much more. If you get me to like Chris Cuomo, you know that there's there's no. I like Cuomo because he'll bring anybody on his show. I like that.
Yeah.
I like the fact that he's not afraid to argue with somebody, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that he does that, even if he doesn't have my favorite last name. But anyhow, but yeah, I think I think that may be one thing. I think obviously the rise of alternative media is another. But I don't know how these corporations have endless amounts of money. I mean, Disney can lose money left and right, and it's just a write-off, just bleed it onto another entity. They own ESPN. They own. I mean, where do you? They've been hemorrhaging too.
Yeah.
So I think also the old media is going to have to adapt more.
Yeah.
They're going to have to adapt more to. It's funny watching people leave that sector and start their own podcast. That's Mark Halperin, Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
They're even more successful than they were on those shows before. Mark Halperin's podcast is great. He brings on Sean Spicer, and I can't remember the Democrat's name. He's a pretty good guy, Dan something, but he's pretty straightforward. But it's pretty good. It's a pretty good show. The Two-Way podcast. And Mark Halperin's a great journalist who's lambasted for predicting Trump would win in 2016. Just goes, hey, been to Trump rallies in 30 states. Get your ass out of New York and Washington one time. There's no question he can win.
Yeah.
And, of course, we all know what happened. But, yeah, it's funny listening to all these. Megyn Kelly is another one who's now goes on her own podcast, and she's way more bigger than she was. And, she worked for NBC, she worked for Fox. So maybe if the good people leave and they're left with the garbage, that may be another way that happens. But
yeah,
I don't know. I just think it isn't. I don't think freedom of the press means that they just do and say anything with no repercussions at all. And I think that's just what I want.
Yeah.
But again, if there's no accountability from these think about these corporations, these DEI corporations and all that.
Yeah.
There's accountability if you don't hire, if you don't put enough chocolate chips in that vanilla shake. But if somebody costs you $30 million or whatever, then they can keep their job. It's ridiculous.
Right.
Horrible. Horrible. I don't know. It's amazing how much podcasts have grown, though. Mm-hmm. It's like in the time we've been doing it. I mean, every day you go on, and some of them stink. I'll be honest, some of them are bad. Because I think everybody just thinks they can do a podcast, and there's an art to it. There's a talent to it. You got to have, if you're going to have a podcast talking about, how to save moldy bread or something. I mean, nobody's going to listen to that. You got to have something relevant to say. And I think that's one thing that I like about the podcasts that have debate. If you got a podcast where a Republican talks to a Republican, well, there's 5,000 podcasts like that.
Yeah.
Why should I listen to yours?
Right.
So there's got to be something different. So, it's like our original concept. We ran out of topics after 7 years of talking about local government. I mean, there was no podcast out there like that. I mean, we beat it to death as long as we could. But, I mean, you don't, it was unique. Mm-hmm. And that's what you have to have. So, I mean, you know what? Your average journalist, too, ought to be listening to these podcasts because podcast, Joe Rogan, an actor and a martial arts guy, asks better questions than anybody I see on television, Fox included.
Absolutely. How many times have I seen a journalist, sometimes on Fox, sometimes on other networks, where they ask a question and then they let somebody say something that's not true, and there's no follow-up questions. I mean,
Kamala Harris interview. That's a Kamala Harris interview.
Exactly.
Dana Bash.
How long did you know about Joe Biden's, deficiency mentally? Oh, he's fine. Oh, okay.
The burden is unburdened because that's burdensome.
So yeah, I just
someday that'll be written though. Someday I hope very soon, but someday we're going to know everything about that, I think.
Yeah.
There's too much money, too many books to be written.
Right.
Too many things like that. Somebody will pull a Stephanopolous who stabbed Bill Clinton in the back. Somebody will pay somebody enough money to write that. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Harris's role, because she had a role. Mm-hmm. The press's role.
Well, they've already stabbed him in the back by replacing him as the candidate. They're for sure going to put books out as soon as he's out of office.
And who knows how long he's going to live or be By the way, let's wrap up. I'm going to wrap up with something. Death of Jimmy Carter. We didn't address that. Passing away a couple days ago. Obviously not the best president we've ever had.
Not a good president.
What do we have? How many living presidents are there now? There's Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, and soon to be Biden.
Right.
So 4.
And Trump. He's a former president as well.
Okay.
So
we'll swap Biden for Trump in a minute.
Yeah.
In a couple, well, we already have in my book.
Right. But I mean, he is a living president because he did serve a term already.
True. So thoughts, Jimmy Carter?
Oh boy.
What comes to your mind when I say Jimmy Carter? What comes to your mind?
If I'm being nice, Habitat for Humanity.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of things he did in his post-presidency. That's me. I don't remember him as president. So for me, he's the guy building houses in Guatemala. That's his humanitarian efforts, which I respect.
Yeah.
The things I didn't like about his post-presidency is pre-Biden, I considered him the worst president of the 20th century.
Right.
Why would I go to him for his opinion on anything political? With all due respect to Mr. Carter, I don't care what you think. You sucked. If you don't like what the axis of evil, then I don't care.
Right.
I'll go ask Reagan his opinion. Well, Reagan couldn't have given one then, but I mean, I mean, you go back to him kind of coming out of nowhere in winning in 1976, and of course 1980, which was thought to be a close election, and it wasn't. Not much you can say positive about his time in office.
He grew some good peanuts.
I heard that. Yeah. Now he lost his wife a year or so ago, right?
Yeah. It wasn't too long ago.
Yeah. So they both lived to damn near 100.
Yeah.
I think it was 76 years or something they were married. I mean, I wonder if that's got to be up there. I'm sure it's a record for a president because no president's ever lived that long. He is the longest lifespan.
Yeah.
It's Jimmy Carter. I don't know who number 2 is. It might have been Bush Sr.
Yeah, he was pretty old.
Reagan, maybe? Reagan was 94?
Was he?
93?
Huh.
Oh, I'm not gonna look it up. You're gonna make me look it up. I'm not gonna look it up. What's interesting? What's interesting is that what did I read? George W. Bush, Donald Trump, and Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Were born in the same year, a couple months apart from each other, all 3.
Okay. Wow.
So you got those 3. Obviously, President Obama's younger. And President Biden was born in the War of 1812.
Yeah.
So you got that. But so, there was a time when President Johnson passed away
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't very old. He was only in his 60s.
Was he that young?
Yeah. 'Cause he died during Nixon's second term. And when he died, there was no living ex-presidents. President Truman had passed away in like 1970.
Okay.
Eisenhower passed away around that time. Of course, Kennedy was killed. And, and President Johnson, I want to say he died in like 73 or 74. And there were no living ex-presidents, which is just incredible.
Wow.
So, and I think the next death was, I remember President Nixon's death. I was in high school. He was probably 80-something.
Yeah.
94, 95, something like that. And then I don't remember a death until President Reagan, but maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know. Are you looking it up? By the way,
Yeah, I was trying to.
can I say something too?
Yeah.
In 2 weeks, the Vice President of the United States is going to be 7 years younger than me. I finally know what my dad felt like when Dan Quayle took office. I mean, it's just like, oh my God, really? Seriously?
Yeah. Well,
I'm 7 years older than the Vice President. I love JD, but I mean,
yeah. John Adams lived till 90.
I knew that because he died the same day as Thomas Jefferson.
Yes, he did on Independence Day.
Yep,
Nonetheless.
1826.
Herbert Hoover lived to 90. Of course, Jimmy Carter at 100. Oh, Gerald Ford, 93.
George H.W. Bush was 94 when he passed away.
And Reagan was 93 as well. So Joe Biden is currently 120.
Well, he's 82,
Yes.
and he's got to probably be in the top 10 already for longest lifespan. Something like that. I mean, he's got to be. He's got to be up there.
He's I'm sure up there. Yeah.
Yeah, I know he wasn't president, but how old was Bob Dole when he passed away?
I don't know.
Was he damn near? He was damn near 100.
Yeah, he had to be pretty old.
I mean, he was a World War II vet. He had to be.
Yeah.
I'm going to say he was probably 96, 7, 8. I don't think he
Yeah.
made it to 100, but he was pretty darn old.
Yeah, Biden might be in the top 10. Jefferson was 83. Madison was 85. John Quincy Adams only made it to 80.
Yeah, he died as a member of Congress.
Yeah, he was fighting for the abolition of slavery.
Yeah, 1848.
Yeah. Harry S. Truman, 88.
Now, what year did Truman pass away? 70, 71, something like
72.
that? 72. That was kind of right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Forgot about Ford, that he was in his 90s also.
Yeah.
So all these presidents, I mean, Trump might live to be 100. But I don't think Trump's anywhere close to, guy has the energy of a guy half his age.
Yeah, I mean, he could be mistaken for somebody that's easily
20 years
60s,
younger.
yeah.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Yeah. Bob Dole made it to 98 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that was pretty close. Bob Dole, Russell, Kansas. Going to be the next president. So why don't you go on back home to your summer home in Maine? Your automatic garage door opener. I'll tell you what. Go back to SNL 1988. Dan Aykroyd does the best Bob Dole. Mm-hmm. He did a hell of a Jimmy Carter. Yeah. But Aykroyd came back.
Yeah.
To I don't know if he must have hosted the show, but if you go back to it was 1988, and it had to be the best Bob Dole I've ever heard. Was so yeah. So we've had maybe half a dozen presidents living in their 90s now. Yeah. Adams, Carter, Reagan, Ford, Bush Sr. George W. might live quite. He's in really good shape.
He is.
I mean, the guy put a treadmill on Air Force One. I mean, I think he'll live quite a long time too. Now, Mrs. Bush passed away right before George.
Barbara?
Yeah. It was like a couple months. I mean, I remember when
something like
I remember when she passed away. I'm like, he's a goner.
Yeah.
He's done. There's no way he didn't make it. A couple of months, I don't think he made it. We all kind of knew. You know, those presidential funerals, I'll tell you what, it really gets you to reflect. I'll just share one last thing. I remember President Reagan's death. I was golfing and I found out about it. Of course, at the time I had like a flip phone. You know, it wasn't quite like it is now. I heard about it when I came in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
It was on TV that he had passed away. And President Reagan, of course, the first president I really remember. I don't remember. Yeah. And I just remember, the one thing I remember was the weirdest feeling that I had when he wasn't president anymore.
Right.
You know, watching him walk off. And Nancy Reagan was very visible in a good way, you know.
Yeah.
To just say no. I remember that was a big thing at the time. She went on that, what was that show with Gary Coleman?
Different Strokes?
Yeah, she went on that show, and it was the weirdest feeling when he wasn't president anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute. We got a new president?
Oh, I know.
And seeing him they walked off to the helicopter or whatever that took them away. And
Marine One or
whatever it was. Yeah. It was just the weirdest feeling to have that change. I just can't describe it. I was 11 or 12 at the time, and it was like, wow. You know, maybe being somebody who paid attention to politics, just being in awe of in retrospect, it was the awe of the United States, the awe of the Constitution, the awe of nobody's a king here.
Right.
You know, and maybe that was it. I don't know. But is that what happened when, John Adams was sworn in and Martha and George Washington went off on their horse to Mount Vernon?
I was going to say, got in the helicopter.
Yeah. Refueled at Jefferson's estate or something. I don't know. I mean, it's just, but I just remember that as the weirdest feeling in the world, that we had a new president.
Yeah. Well, remember, I mean, back then, though, the presidency wasn't what it is today. It was a lot weaker, as designed. True. I mean, for George Washington to leave, he wasn't the most powerful man in the world. Definitely the United States, but not the world.
Yeah.
It was a different feeling.
And read the comments of King George III.
Yeah.
Just ripping Washington for giving up power and retiring. And what is this? How can this guy just go home and retire like a common guy? And Washington was like, F you. I've served in the military for 40 years and done this. But King George has this whole manifesto about just ripping Washington for, how can the guy give it up? He could be the king. Washington could have been. That's the thing. We're so lucky. George Washington never got paid. This is the most amazing thing. Washington was not a rich guy. There's myths about he was land rich.
Yeah.
But he wasn't cash rich. And he never got paid for being the commander of the army. He never got paid for being president. He never took a nickel.
Wow.
And it's amazing when you think about that.
When you figure that George Washington, he was in debt. I mean, he died in debt.
Like I said, he died land rich, not cash rich.
He couldn't release his slaves upon his death because he had debt.
Yeah, I know. President Jefferson was the same way. Just these people, they never cared about it. I think Washington had a sense. I think Jefferson did too, about how they would be looked back on. I think they got it, and I read Washington's part of his farewell address the other day. I read it like twice a year, just to anytime I feel like being a neocon again, and it's just. The wisdom of that man is just not I think he still doesn't get the credit he should. That's just my opinion. But Jay,
yes.
Why don't you inspire us here? Say something, will ya? The sign-off sermon. Styling, profiling, jet flying, limousine riding, wheeling, dealing, son of a gun. Jay, take it away.
Well, thank you, Andrew. You know, the more you see the media in action, the more you want to shut it off. I don't know. A lot of people that listen to the media, it's your high propensity voters, your low information, low propensity voters really don't spend time watching Fox News or CNN or MSNBC. They go home and they watch The Bachelor or Survivor, you know. And
are they still on?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I don't watch them myself, but you know,
you watch Keeping Up with the Crustaceans.
No, I don't. Crustaceans, I do keep up with. A good shrimp dinner, that's nothing like that. But I tell you, where we need to see some change, I believe, is taking some of the power away from these big companies. That more of us should follow the lead of the low information voter and not pay attention. Now, we can't just totally tune out and drop out or whatever they did in the 60s. Instead, we got to find people that we can trust. People that put the truth first. People that tell you the way it is, but not just without showing you the facts, that where things are coming from. Now, one way that we can do that is for a wave of citizen journalism to come across definitely our state. If we had people in every county that were looking at what went on in city council meetings and county board meetings, what the sheriffs were doing and the county attorneys, you know, what did so-and-so say or do here or there, and then reporting on what's going on in St. Paul, and that would be amazing. You know, I've been in the press room during a press briefing, and there's some room there. You know, if people wanted to form some sort of a news organization, they could file to get press credentials and be in that room and ask some tougher questions than you're going to hear out of the Star Tribune or the 5 or the 4 or the 9 or the 11. Though you guys have an opportunity to be able to tell the world what's actually going on here. But we need people that are interested in doing it and willing to do it. And, you know, we, like I said at the beginning of the show, have just entered season 9 of this podcast. And that is something that isn't easy to do. You know, it's not always easy to get out in the evening when it's below zero, or take time to edit a podcast and put it up. It takes time. But you know what? It's worth doing because they do a great job. We've got some other independent podcasts that are out there that I believe do a good job. And those are the beginnings of what we're looking at. But we have to have more people. We have to have more organizations that network and share stories across their platforms so that people across the state know what is going on here. Because I believe that if that happens and the story gets out, that this state will continue to trend into the conservative camp. So we've got to do this. I know we can, and I know that it's not easy, but we all have a part we have to play. So let's do it. Let's join together and make this happen. You can do it if we can do it, because we're just a couple of normal guys that got together, saw a need, saw the injustice that was happening around us, and we never stopped talking about it. That's all it takes. You can put it out there for free on places like Spotify or YouTube. You don't have to even pay for a service. Now, having a website and all that stuff helps, but just start somewhere. Start talking about what you see going on around you. Take video of things you see happening in your community that isn't right so that people can see it and hear it with their own ears. We need source material. And you guys can do this. I know it. I know you can do it. Well, let's see what we can do this year, 2025. Let's make this the most talked about state in the nation, and let's do that by having each county the most talked about county. And you do that just by talking and refusing to sit down and be quiet. We love you, Minnesota, but now it's your turn to get to work.
Driven to push on, to fight, to strive. It's that spark that makes me feel alive. Let it blaze on through the night. Let it blaze on through the night. Let it blaze on.